Thank you, President. I have to confess that sitting on that side of the chamber to be addressed as on that mob on that side left me a little bit perplexed. But it is something I take on board, because I would be arguing that it is every side where we ought to be looking closely at what is actually happening. Looking at the motion just now, the last part, I'll share very much the view of the Minister. I would deeply regret giving thanks to Morrison for giving us back our own money. I think it's stupid. We paid so much in the way of our GST and got so little back. It was downright disrespectful, and this is from all sides. And to find that certain premiers are demanding to change this so they can take more of our hard-earned money in GST and then give it back to us and expect us to be thankful. Who are we? The peons, the slaves, the hoplites?
So can I ask you then, if in certain years Western Australia got more money than the other states and was subsidised, would you be equally offended on behalf of the other states that they had to subsidise the state of Western Australia, if that had possibly have occurred?
Thank you for the question. I would think that every state ought to do its best to manage its own budget within its limits, rather than depending on charity of other states. But looking at the windfall we've got, I could then say that we need to be careful how we manage that. And I could criticise this on both sides equally well. We've had, $5 billion there we could spend. And looking at the health service in particular, I see that there is a lot to be desired. But how? Who is going to do this? I have said before, if I were the health minister, God forbid that we could all echo, if I were the health minister, I would not know how to make this happen. And I do know the difference between idiopathic pharyngeal erythema and idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, something that the current minister would have struggles with. So we can ask both sides. I do recall very much, this is actually when Kim Hames, Honourable Kim Hames, was the health minister, and trying very hard to get a machine into our hospital in Newman, where obstetric services had been cut, and women who were due to deliver couldn't deliver in Newman anymore. They had to go to Port Hedland, which is quite a journey away. And the same thing is also true, by the way, of Meriden Hospital, where the West Australia Country Health Service had removed not only all obstetric services, but also demanded that the nurses who were qualified as midwives do not register their abilities or re-register their abilities to deliver children. And what we then had, both in Newman and in Midland, is women who refused to go the distance into Perth or wherever, and then turned up in labour, dropping their babies in ED, into a place where the nurses and the doctors were not skilled at delivering complex problems in childbirth, without adequate paediatric support for neonatals who might have been in distress. This is dangerous. This is preventable. This is avoidable. And it is something on both sides of the House I'd recommend we strongly consider. I could then begin to look at how the health services are being managed in general. And I note, and I support the idea that we've had earlier, that the nurses are deeply dissatisfied. I know of a hospital where 100% of the nurses wish to resign because they are being demoralised, demotivated, de-skilled. And they are only there because that's the only place where they can earn $1. And they are bullied, and they are harassed. And I recall very well one instance where a patient was very well managed, slipped and fell, an elderly patient, and fractured her pelvis. She was reaching for a banana. And I recall how it was managed. I diagnosed that. We had an X-ray done in our place, spoke with the orthopaedic surgeons in Perth. Fine, they said, not going to do anything, doesn't require surgery. The patient needs to be mobilised. A woman in her just shy of 90 who refused to move because of the pain and refused to get out of bed, which was essential to prevent bronchopneumonia happening. And how she was then demanded to be sent to Midland. And rather than a simple slip, this is called a SAT-1, implying that the nurses had been negligent, how demoralised and how demotivated they were. And one obnoxious senior nurse trying to make a point and demoralising the whole service in our hospital. That was reversed when I demanded that if anything were to happen when she lay in Merredin, unwilling to get up, left in bed, liable to get bronchopneumonia, I then suggested that perhaps I would involve the coroner were anything to happen, because that was mismanagement as against the good management in our hospital then. Only that made a change. So we're dealing here with bullying and mismanagement at a senior level, and that is something that both sides of the House, both governments, could actually manage better. We need to take this very, very seriously. There's a lot of stuff happening in our health service, and I would not criticise any one particular health minister or one particular government. This is a fact that people who are controlling this have not got the experience of the health service to make a sound judgment. They're relying on information that they are given, which leads me to wonder why I, as the only doctor in this House, have been refused permission to speak to the Chief Health Officer and inquire particularly about the health service now with COVID. There I could criticise the government, because... Well, they're human. You as well, I'm sure, would have no trouble understanding the technology and the language of the Chief Health Officer, but somehow it is to be a secret. And the questions that I have, I cannot answer to my patients. And so this leads me to the problem I have. And it is true probably on both sides of the House. It's a standard feature, I believe, of government, that transparency is spouted. We will be transparent, but it is noticeable in its absence. And this does no service to the people we represent. We then have the situation here in our current government, which, due to democracy, we have a very one-sided government, and we find, and I was noting with great distress, that as a House of Review, we look at the laws which are created in the other place, which are not by any means ever perfect, because they are created by humans who are experienced but not perfect. And the laws are brought to us for review, and rightly so, amendments are discussed and put forward to improve what has been given, laws meant in good faith. And in this current Parliament, not one single amendment that we have put forward has ever been accepted, which implies either that the laws are created completely perfect, or that we are not getting true democratic input, and that the laws of the future, we will spend some time having to undo the damage done by not addressing the potential problems in the legislation. This I would criticise. But I'm sure that would be true of any government with such a majority.
Order. Member, I need to interrupt your debate to allow the mover of the motion a right of reply.
Thank you, and I will just mention in passing that I will not be supporting the motion.